Hey, today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I wish I would have known prior to deciding on having a mastectomy. These are not all mastectomy exclusive things, but just going down the road of looking at lumpectomy or mastectomy surgery, the top 6 things that I wish I would have known. There are more than 6 things, but I kind of cut it down to the most important things. So this video is meant for people who are looking to get either a lumpectomy or a mastectomy and trying to think of or learn what the most important factors are. And I also want to say that today I'm not wearing my prosthetic, so if you wonder why I'm a little lopsided, that's why. So the first thing is that probably the most important thing of all is that when I was choosing between lumpectomy and mastectomy, no one ever explained to me that lumpectomy is indicative of more pain and long-term side effects and radiation. I didn't realize that lumpectomy meant necessarily being coupled with having radiation, almost always when you have cancer or DCIS. It's almost always standard of care, recommendation, protocol that you get radiation. And radiation carries with it a lot of potential long-term chronic pain-related side effects. It was kind of on a fluke that I decided to get a mastectomy instead of a lumpectomy, and I learned at the very last minute that if I did get a lumpectomy that it would mean radiation, and I definitely didn't want radiation. And since then I've learned even more and more and more reasons why I would not have wanted radiation. But I hadn't done a lot of homework on it, partly because I was kind of avoiding it because it sounded like a nightmare. But now that I have done research on radiation, I'm so relieved that I got a mastectomy and not a lumpectomy, which again would have necessitated radiation in almost every case. The second thing that I wish I would have known prior to mastectomy, having been diagnosed with DCIS about a year before my mastectomy, I was not aware of all of the possible things that you could find out while you're in there. And I guess, again, if I had gone and done a ton of research over many months, I would have learned that many people with DCIS also have invasive cancer hiding in their breasts when they have dense breasts like mine. And it turned out that that was the case for me, and I really, really lucked out. I wish that my surgeon had just told me that there could be other cancers hiding in there. No surgeon that I met with did tell me that. I'm really lucky because I almost opted not to have the lymph node dissection process. I was thinking, after all of my research on whether I needed it as someone diagnosed with DCIS, I was thinking I didn't need it. All of the research I was looking at said that it wasn't necessary. It was overtreatment for those of us that are diagnosed with DCIS. Well, turns out I really, really needed it because I had a little bit of invasive lobular cancer. And with the scar tissue that grows after surgery, you can't really go back in and get lymph nodes very easily. And so I'm really grateful that I did get the lymph node dissection, that I chose that option, even though at the moment that I chose it, I did kind of feel as though it was an overtreatment and I probably didn't really need it. A couple of surgeons did recommend it, even though I felt it was overtreatment, but they didn't explain to me why, and I wish that they had explained to me that there was a good chance with my density of breast that there was invasive cancer hiding, and that that invasive cancer may have already gone to my lymph nodes, and we would want to find that out. Huge, huge thing to know when you're planning a mastectomy and deciding whether or not to get lymph node dissection. The third thing I wish that I had known in my entire cancer journey, I just made a video about this, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I wish I had known about the phenomenon of Camino necrosis and the fact that that is assigned to the radiologists and the doctors and surgeons, that Camino necrosis means that your DCIS is growing and could become invasive soon. I didn't know that. I didn't even know about Camino necrosis prior to my mastectomy. I learned about it well after my mastectomy, and I really wish that I had known about its existence. It would have helped me to monitor whether or not I needed a mastectomy and when I needed the mastectomy. So I really wish that I had known about that, and again, I've just made a whole video about it explaining it, so I won't go into that here, but I'll link it above and below. The fourth thing that I learned after the fact, and wish that I had known at the very beginning of my cancer journey, is probably pretty obvious to those of you with a medical background. I didn't have a whole lot of surgeries in my background, just tubal ligation and a couple of other really minor polypectomy in my uterus. So I didn't have a lot of familiarity with the process of finding a surgeon. And I stayed with my first surgeon, who I could not stand to be in a room with, for over a year. My first oncologist, my first surgical oncologist or breast surgeon. I thought I needed to be loyal to her for some reason. And she and I did not communicate well at all. She was not a partner to me. She was extremely condescending and somewhat threatened by the fact that I was a nutritionist and that I liked to take the slow road and the more informed road. She was not interested in sharing what she knew with me or helping me to know what studies to look at as I wanted her to. I was with her for almost a year and a half before I started looking for other surgeons. And I felt so silly after I started looking for other surgeons. I think I got permission to do so just by listening to podcasts about breast cancer. And I think it was actually my own integrative oncologist, MD, down in Ashland, who I heard a podcast interview with, and she said, you really need to get a second opinion from a different surgeon, even if you really like your surgeon. And when she said that, I felt like I had permission to do so. And so I started making appointments with multiple breast surgeons. Turns out my personality is not a good match for most breast surgeons. And so I had to interview quite a few before I found someone that I liked. And even then, I didn't end up having a good experience and didn't end up trusting her after my surgery. So then I've been looking for another breast surgeon after that for my second mastectomy that I'm yet to have still. So I wish that I had known that it is really good practice to find a surgeon that you feel is a peer and is treating you as a peer, is treating you as an intelligent individual. And if you're curious about things and you want to learn alongside of them, that they welcome you to learn alongside of them and that they have time for you to do so. I did not know any of those things were not only permissible, but actually really wise and a smart way to go. And I learned the hard way and took a lot of extra months trying to navigate through my healing process and decision-making process. It would have been a lot better to start out with someone that felt like a real partner to me. Similarly, the fifth thing on my list of things I wish I had known is that sometimes the best surgeons are at the educational or cancer research institutions. And again, I do realize this is coming from a place of privilege and a place of having an insurance company that is extremely flexible. But now that I know I can go down to UCSF in San Francisco and up to Fred Hutch in Seattle and learn from the experts, I really have been kicking myself and realizing that I should have been doing so from day one. The amount of important information that I've learned from experts in research hospitals and educational hospitals has been just amazing amounts more than I have from your typical kind of private hospital or corporate cancer center. Certainly, I realize this is kind of the norm for most people, is just to go through kind of the average cancer treatment at the average cancer treatment center that's closest to their home. But if you're interested in getting an ideal situation and learning all of the information about the best possible choices before you and all of the detailed information about the choices before you, you really want to go to an educational institution at the very least. What I found is in the city of Portland, which is my closest city, that even the educational institution was not up to par. It wasn't something that my peers and people I talked to online were finding a lot of really good information and data and shared kind of decision making. And so I find that on the West Coast, at least, the best institutions are in Seattle and in San Francisco and probably, of course, LA. LA is way too far away for me, but Seattle and San Francisco are much closer and much more attainable for me and much more familiar for me too. So I probably am going to be having my second mastectomy surgery in Seattle, even though it's going to add a lot of cost for travel and boarding and just eating away from home for my first week after surgery. But I really want that quality. I really want the experts to be working on me. And so I've decided that it's worth it. It's just my health, my body, my outcome, my lack of regret is all worth finding the best possible providers in my region. And that's something I've never really comprehended in my lifetime. It sounds overly indulgent and highly overprivileged, and I'm embarrassed sometimes to talk about it with especially my peers, people I've known for very long, because I feel like they are judging me as someone who has standards that are just way too high. But I don't want to have regrets about my cancer process, my surgeries, my decisions. And there are so many decisions before you when you're having mastectomy or lumpectomy. And I just feel like it's something I need to set an example, even for those friends that don't understand. I want to set an example for them and for my daughter and other younger people who I know in my life, that this is really important and you are worth getting expert care and the best, and people who actually are paid and have time to sit with you until you understand everything fully and you don't have any more questions to ask. That's something I would have loved to know right off the bat going into this a couple of years ago. And finally, something a little bit different, but really important. The last thing that I wish I had known going into lumpectomy or mastectomy is that a lot of women have zero pain and zero regret after having a mastectomy. I don't know about lumpectomy because there's a lot more complications. And like I said, radiation is more probable. But a lot of the women that I've met and interacted with online have zero regret about having, especially when they go flat. I've met a lot of people who have regret about getting implants or getting deep flap or other fat redistributing surgeries. But in terms of going flat, and in terms of having a mastectomy, and in terms of pain, I've met way more women than not that are very, very happy and comfortable and at peace with their outcome. And man, if I had only known that the night before my surgery, I was just convinced I was going to have a lifetime full of pain after my surgery. Because I know that some people do. And I just happened to talk to a surgeon and ask her a really important question that I really recommend that you ask any surgeon that you meet with, and every surgeon that you meet with, even if you don't hit it off with them, which was, what would you do if you were standing in my shoes right now? And that surgeon, even though I didn't really hit it off with her and I didn't end up going with her for her surgery, she answered very candidly and said, I've learned over the years that mastectomy involves less pain than lumpectomy. And I think when I was younger, I would have gotten a lumpectomy in your shoes, but now that I know about the pain factor, I really think that I would choose mastectomy. And that answer was the first of many things that ended up changing my mind and allowing me to go more comfortably with mastectomy than lumpectomy. And it was a big hurdle because I didn't want to give up my breast. I thought I was going to be devastated after giving up my breast, and turns out I'm not devastated at all. I'm pretty happy with having flat closure. So that's a big surprise, and I wish I had known that ahead of time. Of course, you can't know that you're not going to have regrets ahead of time. But this is just one story and one instance of one person that didn't, and I'm so, so happy and relieved that I don't. So those are the big things that I wish I would have known ahead of time before my first mastectomy. And maybe someday I'll have a list of things that I wish I would have known today, which is about a month prior to my second mastectomy. And I'll make that video later, I guess, if that comes up. But I've learned so much in the last 6 months just since my first mastectomy. And I just wanted to share this with you in case it's helpful to you. Be sure and leave questions and comments if you have them. I have comments open below. And if you're interested in these kinds of discussions and conversations, be sure to subscribe, because I'll have a lot more content, especially as I go toward having my second mastectomy in the next month or so. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.